Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. It all began in a room that smelled of old money and new anxiety. The air conditioning in the 40th floor conference room hummed a low, monotonous tune, a sound I'd come to associate with the slow execution of my professional soul. My name is Isaiah Carter, or at least, it was then. I was 32 years old, the vice president of finance for Meridian Consolidated, and I was, by every conceivable metric, a success. I had the tailored suit, the corner office with the view of Central Park, the six-figure salary, and the profound, gnawing emptiness that comes with ticking all the right boxes. So, to reiterate, our CEO, Mr. Sterling, said, his voice as smooth and cold as the marble tabletop between us, "The board has selected you, Isaiah, to be this year's candidate for the Executive Leadership Transformation Retreat." I stared at him. Richard Sterling was a man carved from granite and ambition, his silver hair swept back perfectly, his eyes holding the detached appraisal of someone who moves billion-dollar assets before his first cup of coffee. He wasn't a man you questioned, Puzzle, but this felt different. "The transformation retreat," I repeated, the words feeling foreign and slick in my mouth. "With all due respect, sir, I've never heard of it. Is this new?" Sterling steepled his fingers, a gesture that always meant he was about to deliver a piece of information he considered non-negotiable. "It is not new, Isaiah. It is, however, discreet. It's a specialized program for our most promising senior leadership. Think of it as an advanced course in empathy, perspective, and personal limitation." The corporate buzzwords hit me like a cloud of tranquilizer darts. Empathy, perspective. It sounded like something human resources cooked up after a weekend workshop on mindfulness. "I appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Sterling, but my team is in the middle of closing the quarterly numbers. It's a critical time. Perhaps next year would be better." I tried to keep my tone respectful, but the protest was clear. He gave me a look that could freeze water. This wasn't a request. A chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning snaked its way down my spine. There was an undercurrent here I couldn't grasp. The other VPs at the table, all men, all sharks in the same gray and navy suits as me, shifted uncomfortably in their leather chairs. They knew something I didn't. Their eyes darted away when I tried to meet their gaze. "What exactly does this retreat entail?" I asked, my jaw tightening. Sterling leaned forward. The air crackled with a sudden intensity. "It entails shedding your skin. Isaiah, it requires you to inhabit a perspective so alien to your own that it forces you to reevaluate every assumption you've ever made about power, influence, and identity." He paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the room. I felt like a defendant waiting for a verdict. "For 6 weeks, you will be enrolled in an immersive program. For the duration of that program, and for a probationary period upon your return, you will live and present as a woman." The hum of the air conditioning stopped, or maybe my hearing just shut down. The faces around the table swam in and out of focus. I heard a sound and realized it was a choked laugh coming from my own throat. "You're joking." Sterling's expression didn't flicker. Meridian does not joke about 7-figure investments in its human capital. I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the polished floor. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "You can't be serious. You want me to cross-dress for a work assignment? This is absurd. It's insulting." "You're thinking about clothing, Isaiah. I am talking about identity," he said, his voice dropping to a low, commanding register. "We are not asking you to pretend. We are mandating a complete experiential shift. You will be given resources, a handler, a new name, a new wardrobe. You will learn to walk, talk, and exist in the world in a fundamentally different way. We believe it is the only way to truly cultivate the kind of empathy required to lead a diverse global company in the 21st century." And if I refused, the question was quiet, but it felt like a grenade in the silent room. Sterling leaned back, the picture of calm authority. "Refusal would be seen as a fundamental unwillingness to grow. It would suggest that you have already reached the limits of your potential at this company. We only want leaders who are prepared to go beyond their limits." It was a threat, elegantly wrapped in corporate jargon. My career at Meridian, the life I had meticulously built, was on the line. I looked around the room again. The other men were now staring at their hands, at the tabletop, anywhere but at me. I was being offered up as a sacrifice, or an experiment, and they were all complicit in their silence. "You're telling me I have to pretend to be a woman?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The idea was so preposterous, so violating, that my mind couldn't fully process it. "No, Isaiah," Sterling corrected me, a flicker of something that might have been pity in his eyes. "It's not about pretending. It's a compulsory part of gender awareness experience. For the next few months, for all intents and purposes, you will be a woman." That night, I sat in my sterile, minimalist apartment overlooking the glittering expanse of the city, a glass of scotch in my hand. The ice clinked, a lonely sound in the quiet. I'd spent hours online, searching for any mention of Meridian's executive leadership transformation retreat. Nothing, not a whisper. It was a corporate ghost. All I had was a confirmation email with a plane ticket to a private resort in the mountains of Colorado and a single line of instruction packlight. "Everything will be provided." I downed the rest of the scotch, the burn doing nothing to quell the fire of humiliation and rage in my gut. This wasn't leadership training. It was a bizarre, psychological hazing ritual, a power play by Sterling to see if I would break. Well, I won't, I thought, the defiance hardening inside me. I would go. I would play their twisted game, jump through their hoops, and I would come back as Isaiah Carter, VP of Finance, untouchable. I would endure it. I would survive it. I closed my laptop. My reflection stared back at me from the dark screen, a man with a sharp jaw, short brown hair, and eyes that were already looking haunted. I had no idea then that the man I was looking at was already a ghost. The resort was less a hotel and more a temple to minimalist aesthetics. Tucked away in a secluded valley in the Colorado Rockies, it was all clean white walls, natural wood, and vast panes of glass that framed the majestic, indifferent mountains. The air smelled of pine and lavender, and a soft ambient music that sounded like wind chimes played from hidden speakers. It was aggressively serene, and it set my teeth on edge. The man who greeted me was Dr. Alistair Whitmore. He wasn't what I expected. I'd pictured some drill sergeant type, a corporate boot camp instructor. Instead, he was a man in his late 50s with kind, crinkling eyes, a soft, almost melodic voice, and the tranquil demeanor of a Zen monk. He wore a simple linen shirt and trousers, and his handshake was gentle but firm. "Isaiah, I am so pleased you've arrived safely," he said, his eyes seeming to look right through the defensive shell I had built around myself. "Welcome to the sanctuary." "This is a strange welcome," I said, my voice harsher than I intended. He smiled, unperturbed. "Change is always strange at its inception. Please, come, we'll get you settled in." My suite was as minimalist and calming as the rest of the facility. There was no television, no computer, just a comfortable bed, a small desk, and a window with a breathtaking view of the valley. My luggage, containing the 3 business casual outfits I defiantly packed, sat by the door. During the orientation session that afternoon, held in a circular room with plush floor cushions, Dr. Whitmore addressed the 3 other men who were my fellow inmates. They were all executives from other Meridian divisions, their faces a mixture of the same confusion and resentment I felt. "Gentleman," Whitmore began, his voice a gentle hum, "I want you to discard everything you think you know about this program. You have not come here to learn how to be better leaders. You have come here to unlearn everything that prevents you from being truly empathetic human beings. Leadership will be the byproduct of that process." I scoffed internally. The man spoke in fortune cookies. The first few days were a blur of what he called sensory deconstruction. We had long sessions of silent meditation. We were blindfolded and led through the woods to identify things by touch and sound. We were given meals of simple, unidentifiable foods and told to focus only on the texture and taste. It was all designed to break down our reliance on established patterns, to force us into a state of pure, present tense awareness. I resisted. I spent my meditations planning Q4 budget allocations and analyzing market trends. I would not let this New Age nonsense penetrate my defenses. Then came the self-image challenges. We were each taken to a private room with a single chair and a large mirror. "I want you to sit here for 30 minutes, Dr. Whitmore instructed me gently. "Simply observe yourself. Do not judge. Do not analyze. Just see." For the first 10 minutes, it was easy. I saw Isaiah Carter. I saw the strong jaw, the confident set of my shoulders in my polo shirt. But as the minutes stretched on, the image began to warp. The face in the mirror became a stranger. The familiar lines and angles seemed alien. Dr. Whitmore's voice, from a speaker in the corner, began a guided meditation. "Imagine the face you see is made of clay," he murmured. "It is malleable. The features can be softened. The lines can be smoothed. Imagine a different shape, a different expression. Imagine a different self looking back at you." I fought it. My jaw clenched, my fists balled in my lap. But the power of suggestion, combined with the sensory deprivation of the past few days, was insidious. An image flickered at the edge of my consciousness: softer cheekbones, fuller lips, eyes that looked questioning instead of commanding. I squeezed my eyes shut, my heart pounding. What are you doing to me? The final stage of the deconstruction was a group hypnosis session. I went in a full-blown skeptic, my arms crossed over my chest, my mind a fortress. But Whitmore's voice was a river, slowly but surely eroding my walls. He spoke of identity as a garment, a costume we wear for the world. Gender is a construct. His voice washed over me, a warm lulling tide. It is a set of rules and expectations you have learned since birth, but underneath that garment, your essence is formless, limitless. Power lies not in conforming to one set of rules, but in having the courage to step beyond them. I felt myself drifting, my body becoming light, weightless. The room faded away. In the warm, peaceful darkness of my mind, I saw a figure take shape. It was me, but not me. This version of me had long, dark hair that fell in soft waves around a face with smooth skin and gentle curves. The lips were soft, the hands were slender and graceful. The figure was wearing a simple dress, and it moved with a fluidity I'd never known. It turned and smiled at me, a smile of recognition, of welcome. And then it spoke, and the voice was higher, odder than my own. Yet it was undeniably mine. "It's okay," it said. "I'm here." I woke up with a gasp, my body slick with cold sweat. My heart was racing. The other men were slowly coming to, looking dazed and confused. Dr. Whitmore was watching me, his expression serene and knowing. "It seems you've met yourself," he said quietly. I stumbled out of the room, my legs unsteady. I felt violated, as if he had reached into my subconscious and planted a foreign seed. But as I leaned against the cool wall of the hallway, trying to catch my breath, I couldn't shake the image from my mind. The face, the voice, the feeling of peace that had emanated from that other me. It felt less like an invention and more like a memory, a part of myself I had forgotten existed. For the first time since arriving, the fortress of my mind had been breached, and I was terrified. Returning to New York City after 6 weeks at the sanctuary was like stepping out of a sensory deprivation tank into a Metallica concert. The noise, the smells, the relentless energy of the city assaulted me. I put on my armor, a crisp navy suit, a starched white shirt, a silk tie knotted so tightly it felt like a noose, and walked back into my life at Meridian, determined to put the entire bizarre episode behind me. On the surface, nothing had changed. I was still Isaiah Carter, the numbers guy. My team still respected my authority. Mr. Sterling nodded at me in the hallway with that same inscrutable expression. The retreat was never mentioned. It was as if it had been a strange, collective fever dream. But inside me, everything had changed. The seed Whitmore had planted had taken root. The suit felt wrong. The coarse wool chafed against my skin, which now felt strangely sensitive. The stiff collar of my shirt was a cage around my neck. My expensive leather shoes felt like blocks of concrete on my feet. I found myself constantly shifting, pulling at my clothes, feeling an itch I couldn't scratch. It was more than just physical discomfort. It was a profound sense of dissonance, as if I were wearing someone else's skin. The hypnosis vision haunted me. The woman with my eyes would appear in my thoughts at random moments during a tense negotiation, while staring at a spreadsheet, while shaving in the morning. Her calm smile felt like a quiet accusation. One Thursday afternoon, rushing to a meeting, I took a shortcut through Bloomingdale's. The path led me directly through the cosmetics department. A wall of perfumes hit me first, a complex symphony of floral, citrus, and musk that was both overwhelming and intoxicating. My stride faltered. I stopped in front of the Chanel counter, my eyes drawn to the neat, militant rows of lipsticks in their sleek black cases. My gaze locked on one particular shade, a deep, rich burgundy called Rouge Noir. It was elegant, powerful, and unapologetically feminine. My hand trembled as I reached out, my fingers hovering over the cool metal tube. The saleswoman, a chic woman with expertly applied makeup, gave me a polite, questioning smile. "Can I help you, sir?" Panic seized me. My heart hammered. No, thank you. Just looking," I mumbled, turning and practically fleeing the store. But the image of that lipstick was burned into my mind. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the cool weight of it in my hand. The imagined sensation of the color on my lips. It was an insane, illogical impulse. I was Isaiah Carter. I didn't wear lipstick. Only for a test. A small, insidious voice whispered in my head. A voice that sounded suspiciously like Dr. Whitmore's. An experiment in perspective. The next day, on my lunch break, I went back. This time, I didn't hesitate. I walked straight to the counter, my face a mask of detached purpose. "I'll take the Rouge Noir," I told the saleswoman, my voice clipped and businesslike, as if I were buying stocks. She didn't bat an eye, simply wrapped it in tissue paper and put it in a small, elegant bag. Walking out of the store with that tiny, illicit package felt more nerve-wracking than closing a multi-million-dollar deal. Back in the privacy of my apartment that evening, I locked the door and drew the blinds. My hands were shaking as I took out the lipstick. The click of the cap opening sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. I stood before the bathroom mirror and stared at my own reflection. Then slowly, cautiously, I raised the tube to my lips. The first touch was a shock. The lipstick was cool, waxy, and smelled faintly of roses. It glided across my lower lip, leaving a trail of deep velvety color. My breath hitched. I pressed my lips together, distributing the pigment. The sensation was utterly foreign, a slick, noticeable weight that made me intensely aware of my own mouth. I looked in the mirror. The slash of dark red against my pale skin and the stubble on my jaw was jarring, grotesque even, and yet it was also electrifying. It was a crack in the facade. The woman from my vision swam into focus, her full-colored lips smiling back at me. A dizzying wave of shame, fear, and a terrifying thrill washed over me. I quickly scrubbed the color off, my heart pounding with guilt, and hid the tube in the back of a drawer. But the seal was broken. A few days later, I found myself in a boutique in Soho, my fingers tracing the impossibly soft fabric of a white silk blouse. Just to feel the texture, I told myself I bought it. The following weekend, it was a simple A-line black skirt, then a pair of sheer black stockings, then, in a moment of sheer madness, a pair of modest, 3-inch black pumps I found online. Each purchase was a secret, a small act of rebellion against the man in the mirror I no longer recognized. The items accumulated in a box in the back of my closet, a hidden arsenal of a different identity. Each night, the ritual grew. First the lipstick, then one night, I worked up the courage to put on the blouse. The silk felt like cool water against my skin, a sensation so different from the starched cotton I was used to. I buttoned it up, the small pearlescent buttons a challenge for my clumsy fingers. Another night, I pulled on the skirt, the way the fabric draped and moved, whispering against my legs as I walked across my living room, was a revelation. It changed my posture, my gait. And with each layer of clothing I added, I heard a voice in my head, getting clearer and stronger each time. It wasn't my voice. It wasn't Dr. Whitmore's. It was the voice of the woman in the vision. "This is me," it whispered, as I struggled with the clasp on a delicate necklace. "This is who I am." The first time I went out was a Saturday in late autumn. The air was crisp, and the leaves were turning brilliant shades of orange and red. For days, I had been building up to it, a knot of pure terror and dizzying anticipation tightening in my stomach. This wouldn't be a furtive walk around the block at midnight. I was going to walk through Central Park in the middle of the afternoon. As her. The transformation took 2 hours. It was a meticulous, almost sacred process. I started with a close shave, closer than I ever had before, followed by a moisturizer that softened my skin. Then came the foundation and concealer, a magical alchemy that blurred the hard angles of my jaw and concealed the shadow of my beard. I watched dozens of online tutorials, my hands clumsy as I tried to replicate the subtle arts of contouring, of applying eyeliner with a steady hand, of blending eyeshadow. It was like learning a new language, a language of light and shadow spoken on the canvas of my own face. Next came the clothes. I didn't just put them on, I assembled myself. The foundation of it all was the lingerie, a simple lace bra, and matching panties. The feeling of the delicate fabric against my skin was both a comfort and a shock, a secret layer of femininity that only I knew was there. I pulled on the sheer stockings, the nylon clinging to my legs, followed by the soft black skirt. The white silk blouse came next. I chose a different set of accessories, a simple silver pendant and small pearl earrings. The most difficult part was the hair. I had bought a high-quality wig, a shoulder-length style in a dark brown that matched my own hair color. Securing it properly, making it look natural, was an art form. When I finally settled it into place, the sensation of hair brushing against my cheeks and the nape of my neck was startling. Lastly, the shoes, the 3-inch pumps. I practiced walking in them in my apartment, my ankles wobbling, my steps hesitant and short. It forced a different kind of movement, a conscious engagement of my hips and core, a deliberate, swaying gait that felt both awkward and strangely graceful. When I finally looked at my reflection, I braced myself. The person looking back wasn't Isaiah in a costume. The makeup had softened my features. The hair framed my face in a new way. The clothes altered my silhouette entirely. I saw a woman. She was tall, a bit broad in the shoulders, perhaps, but she was undeniably a woman. She looked nervous, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. A name came to me then, unbidden. It wasn't the one Dr. Whitmore had assigned in my file for the retreat. This one felt like it came from me. Nava. It felt right. It felt like her. My heart was a jackhammer against my ribs as I opened my apartment door. Every sound in the hallway seemed amplified. The click of my heels on the tile floor was a thunderous announcement of my fraudulence. Everyone will know, I thought. They'll point, they'll laugh, they'll call me out. But no one did. People passed me in the lobby, in the street, their eyes glancing over me with the casual disinterest New Yorkers reserve for strangers. I was just another woman running errands on a Saturday. The anonymity was terrifying, and then, slowly, it became liberating. Walking in the park was a sensory overload. I felt the breeze in a new way, catching the fabric of my skirt and lifting the hair of the wig from my neck. I was intensely aware of my body, the way I walked, the way I held my handbag, the way my hips swayed. It was a conscious performance, and yet, paradoxically, it felt more natural than the stiff, controlled movements of Isaiah. I sat on a bench overlooking the pond, watching families and couples stroll by. For the first time, I wasn't an observer. I was part of the scenery. And then it happened. A man, probably in his late 30s, walking a golden retriever, caught my eye. He gave me a small, appreciative smile. It wasn't a leer. It was just a simple, friendly acknowledgement. My breath caught in my throat, my cheeks flushed with heat. A jolt like a low-voltage electrical current shot through me. It was an emotion I had never experienced from this side of the equation. It was a cocktail of flattery, vulnerability, and a strange, thrilling sense of power. He had seen me, not as a man in a dress, but as a woman, an attractive woman. I gave a hesitant, shy smile in return before quickly looking down at my hands, my heart fluttering. In that single fleeting interaction, something inside me shifted irrevocably. The question that had been tormenting me was this shame, or was it something else finally had an answer? It wasn't shame. It was the dizzying, terrifying, exhilarating feeling of being seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time in my life. On the walk home, my steps were more confident. The click of my heels on the pavement no longer sounded like an alarm, but like a quiet declaration. When I got back to my apartment and looked in the mirror, I saw Nava again. But this time, She wasn't a stranger. There was a faint, genuine smile on her red lips. The line between Isaiah and Nava was beginning to blur. I was no longer sure which one was the performance and which one was real. I kept a private journal, and that night I wrote a name on the first page, not as a nickname or a pseudonym, but as a claim. My name is Nava. The day I decided to go to work as Nava was the single most terrifying day of my life. It was a Monday morning. 2 months after my first walk in the park, the weekend expeditions had become a regular part of my life, a secret world where I felt more myself than I ever did during the week. The box in my closet was now an entire section, filled with blouses, skirts, dresses, shoes, and accessories. Isaiah's suits hung next to them like relics from a past life. The dissonance was becoming unbearable. Leading a double life was tearing me apart. I had to choose. I woke up before dawn, the decision already made, a cold, hard certainty in the pit of my stomach. I wouldn't just be presenting as Nava, I would be embodying her. This wasn't a costume for a day, this was my debut. The preparation was even more meticulous than usual. I chose my armor with care, a knee-length sheath dress in a deep burgundy color, the same shade as my first lipstick that was professional yet undeniably feminine. A simple black blazer over it, sheer nude stockings, and the black pumps I had now mastered. My makeup was subtle but flawless, my hair styled in soft waves that framed my face. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a confident, professional woman. I just prayed that was what everyone else would see. The subway ride to Midtown was an exercise in controlled breathing. I felt the weight of every glance, real or imagined. I clutched my portfolio to my chest like a shield. When I stepped out into the morning rush of the city, the familiar river of suits and briefcases, I felt like a salmon swimming upstream. Walking through the revolving doors of the Meridian Tower, a building where I had been a king in another life, felt like stepping off a cliff. The security guard, who had greeted Mr. Carter every morning for 5 years, just gave me a polite, indifferent nod. My key card, reissued under my new legal name, a process HR had handled with unnerving, no questions asked efficiency a week prior, beeped green. The elevator ride to the 40th floor with a handful of junior analysts felt like an eternity. They made small talk, blissfully unaware that their former VP of Finance was standing among them in a dress and heels. When the elevator doors opened onto my floor, the open plan office fell silent. The clatter of keyboards, the murmur of phone calls, it all ceased. One by one, heads turned, eyes widened, jaws dropped. I could feel 100 questions hanging in the air. I kept my chin up, my gaze fixed on the hallway leading to the executive suites, and walked. The sound of my heels on the marble floor was the only sound in the cavernous space. I expected whispers, mocking laughter, gasps of shock, but there was only a stunned, pervasive silence. It was as if they had all seen a ghost. In a way, they had. The ghost of Isaiah Carter. I didn't stop until I reached the glass-walled conference room where the senior leadership team was already gathering for the weekly strategy meeting. I paused at the door, took a deep breath, and walked in. The effect was the same, only magnified. The VPs, the same men who had silently watched me get sentenced to the retreat months ago, stared at me as if I had grown a second head. Their faces were a comical tableau of shock, confusion, and disbelief. And then I saw Mr. Sterling. He was at the head of the table, and unlike everyone else, he wasn't surprised. He looked at me, taking in the dress, the hair, the makeup, and a small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of his lips. "Good morning," he said, his voice cutting through the thick silence. "Please, have a seat. We were just about to begin." Then he looked around the room at the other stunned faces. "Welcome back, Nava." The name, spoken aloud in this room by this man, was a thunderclap. It was a confirmation, an endorsement. It was an order to the rest of them. This is reality now. Accept it. The meeting was the most surreal 90 minutes of my life. I was scheduled to present the revised projections for the European market. As I walked to the front of the room, I connected my laptop and brought up my slides. My hands were shaking, but I clasped them behind my back. Good morning, everyone, I began. My voice, which I had been training for weeks to find a higher, softer register, came out clear and steady. It was Nava's voice. As you can see from the preliminary data, the market volatility requires a more conservative approach than we initially projected. I launched into my presentation, and a strange thing happened. As I spoke, the fear began to recede, replaced by a surge of adrenaline, of confidence. I wasn't Isaiah Carter, reciting numbers. I was Nava, weaving a narrative, explaining the story behind the data. My language was more collaborative, my arguments more intuitive, yet my command of the facts was as sharp as ever. I was using a part of my brain, a part of my communication skills, that Isaiah had always kept locked away. The other VPs were watching me, their initial shock slowly morphing into a grudging respect. They were seeing that the mind they valued was still there, perhaps even enhanced, within this new baffling package. After the presentation, as people were gathering their things, a younger colleague named Adrian approached me. He was a rising star from the marketing department, sharp and ambitious, with a friendly, easygoing manner. Nava, he said, testing the name on his tongue. That was a brilliant analysis. The way you framed the risk assessment, it gave me a whole new angle for the Q4 campaign. Thank you, Adrian, I said, a small, genuine smile forming on my lips. He lingered for a moment, his gaze holding mine a second longer than was strictly professional. I hope this isn't out of line, but your dress is a really great color. My cheeks flushed, that same jolt of heat I'd felt in the park returning. This was different. This was a colleague. This was a man I had known, distantly, as Isaiah, and he was complimenting my dress. Thank you, I managed, my voice a little breathless. It's new. It suits you, he said with another warm smile, before heading for the door. I stood there for a moment after he left, my heart doing a strange little dance. It was just a compliment, a simple, kind gesture, but in that moment, it was everything. It was acceptance. It was a hint that this new life might not just be about survival, but about connection. Adrian hadn't seen a freak or a fraud. He had seen Nava, a competent colleague who also happened to be an attractive woman. And for the first time that day, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, they weren't mutually exclusive. The weeks that followed my return as Nava were a masterclass in human psychology. The office became my social laboratory. The initial shockwave gave way to a cautious, curious acceptance. The corporate grapevine must have worked overtime, because the official story, trickling down from on high, was that Meridian was a pioneer in a new, holistic form of executive development. I was not a curiosity. I was a case study, an example of the company's forward-thinking ethos. It was a brilliant piece of corporate spin, and it worked. It gave people a box to put me in, a narrative that allowed them to process the change. My professional life transformed as Isaiah. I had led with aggression and intimidation. My authority was derived from being the smartest, most ruthless person in the room. As Nava, that approach was no longer available to me, and I discovered it was no longer necessary. My new persona allowed for a different kind of power. I could be persuasive instead of demanding. I could build consensus instead of steamrolling dissent. My presentations became more engaging, my team meetings more collaborative. My team, initially walking on eggshells around me, slowly relaxed. They discovered I was more approachable, a better listener. My performance reviews, to my astonishment, improved. My personal life, or what little I'd had as Isaiah, was reborn. The process of becoming Nava forced me to be mindful in a way I'd never been. I took pleasure in small things, the scent of a new perfume, the texture of a cashmere sweater, the ritual of my morning makeup routine. I was learning to care for myself, not just maintain myself. Adrian from marketing became a frequent and welcome presence. He would find reasons to stop by my office, to ask my opinion on a new campaign slogan, or just to chat about a new restaurant that had opened downtown. Our conversations were light, but they were laced with a gentle, persistent flirtation. "That's a new blouse, isn't it?" he'd ask, leaning against my doorframe. "Blue is definitely your color." "Are you keeping a log of my wardrobe?" "Adrian," I'd reply, my tone teasing, a blush rising on my cheeks that I no longer tried to hide. Just appreciating the aesthetic, he'd say with a charming grin that always made my stomach do a little flip. These small, intimate moments were intoxicating. They were validation. With every compliment, every lingering glance, the ghost of Isaiah faded further, and the reality of Nava became more solid, more vibrant. I was learning to inhabit my new skin, not just wear it. I was learning to be a woman in the world, how to accept a compliment gracefully, how to navigate the subtle dance of attraction, how to own my femininity without apology. One evening, my phone rang with an unknown number. I answered, and a familiar, calm voice filled the line. "Nava, it's Alistair Whitmore." I froze, my hand tightening on the phone. I hadn't spoken to him since I left the sanctuary. "Doctor," I said, my voice cautious. "I'm not calling to check up on you," he said, as if reading my mind. "I've been following your progress. Your quarterly reports are impressive. Mr. Sterling is very pleased." "The numbers speak for themselves," I said, falling back on old habits. He chuckled softly. "They always do. But I am more interested in your personal report. How are you, Nava, truly?" I hesitated. Looking around my apartment, it was different now, softer. There were flowers on the table, art on the walls, a sense of lived-in warmth that Isaiah's sterile bachelor pad had never possessed. "I'm good," I said. The word feeling inadequate. "I'm myself." "I'm glad to hear that," he said, his voice full of genuine warmth. "You know, when we started this program, many people thought we were trying to force change upon people. They misunderstood. We have never been in the business of changing anyone." "Then what are you doing?" I asked, the question I had wanted to ask for months. "We are locksmiths," he replied. "We believe that inside every person, there are locked rooms, rooms containing potential, empathy, perspectives, even entire identities that have been hidden away out of fear, out of social conditioning, out of a simple lack of awareness. We don't build the rooms, and we don't furnish them. We just provide the key. It is always up to the individual to have the courage to turn it, open the door, and step inside." His words settled over me, a profound and simple truth. He hadn't forced me to become Nava. He had simply given me the key to a door I never knew existed. He had unlocked the part of me that Isaiah, in his rigid pursuit of success and masculinity, had bricked up and hidden away. The choice to step through that door, to live in that room, had been mine alone. "I see," I said quietly, a wave of understanding and gratitude washing over me. "I see now." "I thought you might," he said. "You were always the most promising candidate. Nava, not because of your intelligence, but because of your deeply buried curiosity. All you needed was permission to be curious about yourself." We spoke for a few more minutes, and then he was gone. I hung up the phone and walked to the window, looking out at the glittering tapestry of the city lights. Whitmore was right. I hadn't been changed. I had been revealed. The retreat wasn't a transformation, it was an excavation. They had simply dug away the years of stone and rubble to uncover the person who had been waiting underneath all along. The person looking back at me now in the reflection of the dark glass wasn't Isaiah Carter or some corporate experiment. It was just me. It was Nava, and I was finally home. 5 years. That's how long it had been since that fateful Monday morning. 5 years since Nava had walked into Meridian Tower and Isaiah Carter had walked out of existence. It felt like a lifetime ago, a story I'd read about someone else. The world had changed, and so had I. My career had skyrocketed in a way Isaiah, for all his ruthless ambition, could only have dreamed of. My unique perspective, blending sharp financial acumen with a deeply empathetic leadership style, had proven to be a formidable combination. I rose from VP to Senior VP, then to COO, and 6 months ago, when Richard Sterling announced his retirement, the board had unanimously voted for his successor. Me. Now, my office was on the 70th floor. It was Mr. Sterling's old office, but I had completely redesigned it. The heavy mahogany and dark leather were gone, replaced with light woods, soft fabrics, and modern art. It was a space that felt like me, powerful but not intimidating, elegant but not ostentatious. My face, or rather Nava's face, was on the cover of the latest issue of Forbes magazine, which sat on my coffee table. The headline read, "The Rebirth of Meridian." How CEO Nava Carter transformed a corporate giant by transforming herself. The journalist had been fascinated by my story. Of course, they had framed it as a radical tale of corporate diversity. I didn't try to correct them, not entirely, but I knew the truth was simpler and far more personal. In the interview, they asked me the question I had been asked 1,000 times, in 1,000 different ways. Do you ever feel like you lost something? Do you miss being Isaiah? I had paused, looking out the same window I was looking out of now. You can't lose something you never truly were. I had told her Isaiah wasn't a person, he was a construct. He was a collection of expectations and ambitions that I wore like a suit of armor. The armor protected me, but it also kept me from feeling anything, from being anything. I didn't lose anything when I became Nava. I found everything. Under my leadership, Meridian had thrived. The Executive Leadership Transformation Retreat was no longer a secret. It had become a renowned, albeit still highly selective, part of our corporate culture, a symbol of our commitment to what we now called radical empathy. More executives, both men and women, had gone through their own versions of the program, unlocking their own hidden potentials. Our company became known as one of the most progressive and innovative in the world, a magnet for diverse, brilliant talent. My personal life had blossomed, too. Adrian and I had dated for 2 wonderful years, a time filled with laughter, discovery, and a sweet, gentle intimacy that taught me what it meant to love and be loved as my true self. We eventually went our separate ways, the relationship running its natural course, but we remained dear friends. He taught me how to trust, how to be vulnerable, and for that, I would be forever grateful. I was single now, but not lonely. My life was full, rich with friendships and purpose. The sun was beginning to set, painting the New York skyline in fiery strokes of orange and pink. I walked to the vast floor-to-ceiling window, my heels sinking slightly into the plush carpet. The city spread out below me, a universe of twinkling lights, a testament to human ambition and connection. I touched my hand to the cool glass. In the deepening twilight, my reflection began to appear. Superimposed over the city, I saw a woman in her late 30s, her dark hair now cut in a chic, confident bob. Her eyes, the same eyes that had once belonged to a confused and angry young man, were now calm, clear, and full of a quiet strength. The burgundy dress she wore was a nod to the color that had started it all. The legacy I was building wasn't just about stock prices or market share. It was about creating a space where people didn't have to hide, where they were valued for their whole selves, not just the part they were expected to show. It was the belief that the most profound transformation isn't about changing who you are, but about having the courage to finally become who you were always meant to be. A soft, peaceful smile touched my lips as I looked at my reflection, at the woman who was no longer a performance or a project, but simply me. The journey had been terrifying, bewildering, and ultimately beautiful. I thought back to the man I used to be, not with pity or regret, but with a gentle, compassionate fondness, the way you might think of a younger, misguided version of yourself. He had been so lost, so trapped inside his own armor. "Thank you," I whispered, the words fogging a small patch on the glass. I wasn't sure who I was speaking to Mr. Sterling for his crazy, high-stakes gamble, to Dr. Whitmore for handing me the key to Adrian, for being the first to see me. Or maybe, just maybe, I was speaking to him, to Isaiah, thanking him for his fear, for his resistance, and finally, for his courage to let go, allowing me to be born, thanking him for letting me be me. The reflection of Nava Carter, CEO, smiled back, her eyes shining in the reflected lights of the city she had finally made her own. She was serene. She was complete.